Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. My name's Wendy Rainey. I'm a scholarly assistant professor in the Journalism and Media Production Department in the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication. Along with Molly Schatzko, I am one of the co-developers of this panel. To everyone attending online and to those of you here in the room, thank you for coming. Before we get started today, I would like to read Washington State University's Land Acknowledgement Statement. Washington State University acknowledges that its locations statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. Currently, there are 42 tribes, 35 of which are federally recognized, that share traditional homelands and waterways in what is now Washington State. Some of these are nations and confederacies that represent multiple tribes and bands. The university expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude toward these original and current caretakers of the region. As an academic community, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. Washington State University established the Office of Tribal Relations and Native American Programs to guide us in our relations with tribes and service to Native American students and communities. We also pledge that these relationships will consist of mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. As a land-grant institution, we also recognize that the Morrill Act of 1862 established land-grant institutions by providing each state with public and federal lands, which are traced back to the disposition of indigenous lands. In 1890, Washington State received 90,081 acres of indigenous lands designated to establish Washington State University. Washington State University retains the majority of these lands to this day. We acknowledge that the disposition of indigenous lands was often taken by coercive and violent acts and the disregard of treaties. For that, we extend our deepest apologies. We owe our deepest gratitude to the Native peoples of this region and maintain our commitment toward reconciliation. And with that, I would like to introduce the Dean of the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication, Bruce Pinkleton.
Thank you, Wendy, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Murrow College's Power Voice panel entitled Evoking Change, the Lauren McCluskey Story. I owe a special debt of gratitude to our panelists, those in the room and online, and also to our sponsor, BECU. BECU is generously sponsoring Murrow College's Panel of Voice series this academic year. The series provides a platform for us to discuss critical issues and engage students, alumni, faculty, staff, and the general public at the intersection of communication, society, and social justice. And so we very much appreciate their support across the WSU system. And once again, thank you for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Molly Schatzko. Molly?
Hopefully this is working out. We're good. All right. Thank you, everyone. As Bruce said, my name is Molly Schatzko. I'm a scholarly assistant professor here in the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication here at Washington State University. You're going to see me looking both up and at the audience and at our panelists and at the screen. So we have a large audience online as well. And so that's what we'll be doing here. So I feel very, very grateful to be here and be talking to this very esteemed group of women today. A little background, I graduated here from Washington State University and then the Murrow School of Communication. I ran track and field for 4 years and cross country here at Washington State University. I actually met Jill 18 years ago, a little over that. My very first job out of college, and I met young Lauren at that time. So this story is both special and personal on a number of levels to me, and I feel honored to be speaking with these women today. So thank you for being here. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague, Wendy Rainey, who's smiling at me right now. Wendy is a scholarly assistant professor also in the Murrow College of Communication. Wendy has been an outstanding partner in this process. We have co-developed this panel together. I'd also like to thank our committee that worked on this panel together, extend a special thanks to all of them. So our Power of Voice committee is Dr. Stacy Hust, Dean of Faculty Affairs and College Operations and Chair of Strategic Communication. She's online today. Sarah Stout, who's in the room. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah's Assistant Dean for Student Affairs, and Ben Shores, who's also in the room right there. And Ben is Chair of Journalism and Media Production. I'd also like to thank our Dean, Bruce Pinkleton, for supporting faculty in our college, and also the Power of Voice panel, bringing these important discussions to the forefront here at Washington State University. So thank you, Bruce. In a few moments, I'm going to introduce all four of our panelists and read their bios out loud. But we're going to be talking about a story, a tragic story today, and also these women, how they helped evoke change throughout this process. So you're going to hear from our panelists who told and continue to tell the story of Lauren McCluskey. Lauren was a 21-year-old track star who was murdered on the University of Utah campus 5 years ago. Both parents, Matt and Jill McCluskey, so Jill sitting to my right here, they're professors at Washington State University. They are members of our community. Lauren grew up here in Pullman, Washington, which is a very small community, and she grew up here with her brother Ryan and her family. Her story brought awareness to the pressing issues surrounding dating violence, stalking on university and college campuses today. This panel will focus on the impact of Lauren's story and discuss the role of powerful voices in the process of telling the story, how they raised awareness, and how this is making progress towards social change. So next, I will introduce each of our panelists, the two online as well as the ones in the room. For this panel, we will not be facilitating questions at the end, so all questions are prepared for our panelists. So let's meet our panelists. So here in the room, Jill McCluskey, I'm honored to introduce her. She's the president of the Lauren McCluskey Foundation and Regents Professor and Director of the School of Economic Sciences at Washington State University. She co-founded the Lauren McCluskey Foundation with her husband, Matt, after the murder of her daughter, Lauren. Jill serves as the foundation's president. She was a track mom for Lauren, and I remember these days well of her being a wonderful track mom. They traveled nationally for Lauren to compete and loved spending time together on these trips. In the foundations, working in the foundation, Jill's main focus is on-campus safety, and she's also supportive of the foundation's two additional strategic initiatives, which are amateur athletics and also animal welfare, which were two of Lauren's passions. She started the Lauren's Promise campaign, which you'll hear a little more about today, and she's collaborating on-campus safety. She's collaborating with an on-campus safety scorecard initiative. She shares Lauren's story to increase awareness of the dangers of dating violence and to make a positive change so that others will not lose their daughters to violence. So thank you, Jill, for being here.
Thank you.
Also in the room, right next to Jill, is Nicole Noren. I keep talking into this. I have a mic. Sorry, y'all. Is Nicole Noren. Nicole is a director and producer and journalist for ESPN who has produced more than 50 investigative reports and short documentaries for the network. A recipient of 6 Emmys, 2 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and a Peabody, Nicole has reported extensively on gender-based violence, education, and social issues. A first-gen college student, Nicole is an avid traveler, music lover, photographer, and outdoor enthusiast based in Santa Barbara, California. We were also able to play Listen this yesterday in the room, which was produced by Nicole as an investigative producer for ESPN in her investigative and enterprise unit. Listen is a documentary about the murder of Lauren McCluskey and the institutional systematic failures that led to her death. So thank you for those of you who were in the room for that last night as well. So thank you. Let's welcome Nicole.
Thank you.
So joining us remotely, so on screen, so I'm gonna kind of look at you, Jenny, and then look back. Joining us remotely is former Utah State Senator and attorney, Janie Iwamoto. Janie was elected to the Utah State Senate in 2014, recently retired. She served in leadership as the Assistant Minority Whip. She previously served on the Salt Lake County Council, where she became the first Asian American woman elected in the state of Utah. Janie graduated cum laude in mass communications from University of Utah. She received a JD degree from UC Davis School of Law. She was a partner at a prominent California law firm, and she continues her involvement in criminal and social justice issues, campus safety, and environmental issues, especially related to water quality and quantity as well. She passed key bills enhancing university campus safety plans, creating studies of law enforcement governance and data discreditations, on crimes, and increasing penalties for repeat predators of domestic violence. So thank you, Janny, for being here today.
Thank you.
And finally, joining us remotely is Devin Cantwell Chavez. Hi, Devin. I should look there. Hi, Devin. She is a PhD candidate at the University of Ottawa. Prior to this, she was a graduate student at the University of Utah. In the aftermath of Lauren McCluskey's murder, Devin organized with other students on the University of Utah campus to form an off-campus group, Unsafe U, to hold university administration accountable for improving resources, transparency, and accountability for campus safety issues. So thank you, Devin, sincerely for being here.
Thank you all.
All right, so now we will get into our first round of questions today. Jill, we're going to begin with you. So Jill, you have used your voice in this process. You have used your voice to bring truth, accountability, awareness, and to honor Lauren through the work of the McCluskey Foundation. What was the importance of the power of your own voice after the murder of Lauren? And what do these women on the panel represent to you in telling the story?
So first of all, thank you, Molly and Wendy, and to the Murrow College for holding this. The night that Lauren was murdered, the first media reporting on it was being reported that she was in a fight with her boyfriend, and I was thinking that's so untrue. I knew what was going on, and so I didn't sleep the whole night. And at 5 a.m, I wrote a statement and posted on Twitter that said what actually happened, that she was talking to me on the phone. She had broken up with this man who lied to her. She had contacted the police several times, and what actually happened, and who she was, that she was an honor student, athlete. She went to church. She cared about other people. She loved to sing, so a few things just about her, and that she was going to graduate. She was scheduled to graduate. So I felt like I had to start with correcting the story. I felt obligated to her that I needed to correct the narrative. And then as more and more media contacted me, and I know part of the reason that they were so interested is that she was a attractive white young woman. And I know that there's so many other Laurens that don't get the attention, but I needed to get that information out about who she was and about her. And then media started seeing this, and I changed the narrative. And I was not that aware of the dangers of dating violence and stalking. And I had a quick lesson in that. And I feel like a lot of times when there is this narrative that it was a fight, that they're trying to say that, oh, it's not our fault. And I was saying, yes, it is your fault. We need to hold accountable the people who did not help her. And so that's how it started, basically. And then you also asked me about how did each of these women on this panel, why did I think of them? What were their roles? And they all came in pretty early, and they all played a huge role in making change and in supporting, and also even in supporting me. So it's terrible, emotional thing that happens when your child is murdered. And so sometimes you just almost can't go on with and trying to make change. But when each of these women helped help the cause, help tell the story. And so, for example, Devin was just amazing. The university, I think, was trying at the people at the time were trying to say that, well, no one's really responsible. We're not holding anyone responsible. No one will be disciplined for this, and was not even really looking into it. And they had a program called Safe U, and then Devin and some other students formed Unsafe U and put it on Instagram. And I just thought, oh, that's brilliant. And it got so much attention. And I feel like I had an army of students who were supporting just the outrage that was in me, that how could this have happened? That they were just supporting this and that they were moving it forward. And then Janie Iwamoto, she was also outraged, and she started campus safety legislation that would make real change. And I was talking to, and she is a Democrat in a very Republican state, and my attorney said, oh, she won't get this passed. And they very much underestimated her. And she, the things that she was able to get passed were just amazing. And she testified, and she brought in my husband, Matt, also to testify. And she made sure that all the universities had a campus safety plan and were reporting data and just increasing the transparency. And it was an unfunded mandate also. And people brought that up, and Janie said, well, don't you already have a campus safety plan? So I just thought she was brilliant. And so she kept it going on the legislative side that is changing the culture. Devin was changing it from the student side that was putting so much pressure, and they were forming with rallies and just forming pressure. And then Nicole. So Nicole, I started talking with Nicole just a few months after we lost Lauren, and Nicole is an amazing journalist. So fortunate to work with her. She was able to dig and keep digging, and it's because of Nicole that we found out so many things that we would not have found out. And she moved things forward, and Nicole and other journalists too, but were just amazing, and kept us really focused on finding out the truth and then making change.
Thank you, Jill. We're going to go to each of the panelists and have them talk a little bit about their own involvement in the story as well. One thing I should mention too, when we first sat down, Wendy and I sat down with Jill. We were brainstorming what this could look like. First, Jill jumped on board immediately and said, what can we do? And she reached out to each person on this panel herself to help us build these relationships. And this is an incredible group. So when we talk about these roles each person played in this communication, it was really critical. And there are others. There are others that we could have had this panel be many more people. But these people specifically played a really important role. So Devin, we're going to go to you next. We'll go to each person. But Devin, what prompted you to be an advocate for this? I know Jill gave you a nice introduction about Unsafe U, but talk to us a little more about your involvement, what that looked like from a student perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So I ended up becoming involved in this pretty early, actually almost like the day after Lauren's murder. for kind of two reasons. One was, you know, as a graduate student, I just was starting graduate school at the time. Between my personal networks being, at my undergraduate campus, which had a high rate of sexual assault and dating violence, IPV was something that had a lot of proximity in my life. And I saw a lot of people and friends go through it. And so I kind of had a similar feeling when I saw those initial reports coming out. I was like, that's, they're trying to play this off like this is not intimate partner violence, and this is. So a lot of this started from a feeling that something wasn't right about the way that this was being reported and talked about. I actually sat down, I think it was like a day or two after, and just penned this 1,000-word op-ed to kind of process this. And right around that time, Jill's tweet had come out. There was a lot more discussion of people identifying it as intimate partner violence. So there was kind of I kind of realized right away, wow, this is there are a lot of people kind of coming to terms with the fact that this is intimate partner violence, and almost some not pushback about it, but I think surprise for a lot of people in processing that, because they're like, well, if this is dating violence, what happened to her, then what I experienced also had to be dating violence, right? And so I think there was a lot of people grappling with the reality of what IPV is. Fast forward about a year later, shortly after the lawsuit against the university had gotten filed, the university released its motion for summary judgment. Well, not released, but it became public record, the motion for summary judgment. And one aspect of this motion for summary judgment was a statement from the university basically saying, we don't think it's our responsibility as a campus to keep students safe. And I will tell you, I have never seen so much rage, anger from students, but it was all at this point really disconnected. So I was seeing it on individual pages. It came up in every conversation in every class that I had on campus. And we didn't really have a way to collectively organize. So myself and a few friends, we literally sat down at somebody's kitchen table, and we were like, they have this Safe You campaign, and they're trying to, make this be a culture of safety and not blame anybody for this. And it's like, this is unsafe you. This is a joke, right? So we made this little broken U symbol to kind of play off of this. And we had just a pouring in of folks sharing anecdotes and their personal experiences with dealing with campus safety. And this became, so essentially what we ended up doing was kind of two really pivotal things, I think. The first was allowing students to have a kind of amplified space to share their experiences with institutional, how the institution itself had let them down, and allowing students also recognize that they had power in this process, right? I think sometimes folks discount the amount of power that students have. So, and then the second thing was putting pressure on institutional and structural changes. So we issued a list of demands. I went back and looked at this, fairly recently, and somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the demands that we actually put out to the university ended up getting fulfilled in some way, which I think is a huge win given the type of institutional pressure we were up against. And then we also, I think, became a really key source of information. There was a lot of disinformation and misinformation that has happened, especially in the early days as the story was getting unfolded, and a lot of the university trying to manage the PR on it, and students not feeling like they had an accurate place to get information from. So we also did a lot to try to help students understand what was really happening. So collecting stories from folks like Courtney Tanner, who is a local reporter doing work on this, sharing a lot of the work, as ESPN started publishing this, and Nicole's work, publishing those things as well, or not publishing, but resharing and ensuring that those were sources of information. So, yeah, that's kind of what my role in this ended up being. And I should note too, we ended up doing this as a really horizontal structure. So there were some folks like myself and a few others who took kind of a more public facing and higher risk role in this activism, but we had, several dozen folks, all the way up to like pretty high levels of leadership within the administration, helping and coordinating with this. And I think there's a real power in numbers there for this type of advocacy. So.
Thank you so much, Devin. For the students in the room, you know, there are a couple things Devin said, right? Opt-ed, she sat down, put down her thoughts. She learned Canva. We actually had a conversation about that to do some of the work for Instagram, to use her voice, right? And then we have Janie. So thank you, Janie, pardon me. Janie, talk to us a little bit about your role and what that looked like for you.
Sure. So when I was in the legislature, campus safety was always on my radar. I would have students come to me all the time to talk about concerns that they had. But what hit me personally in the beginning was my son relaying and some other things relating sexual assault and dating violence. And it moved me. He was moved, and he at the time was a member of the Beta Theta Pi fraternity. And I told him, you know, Nathan, how can you help if, you know, it's too big for you? And so he decided to act, and he trained for 40 hours with the Rape Recovery Center. And this is a nonprofit which this fraternity took on as their annual fundraising event. And so many of those, and I had them testify at the first bill that I did, to come in and testify, because students listen to other students and they hear what's on the ground. So that led me to research Title IX and what other states were doing, and what other campuses were doing across the nation. Pretty intense research. And that led to my first bill, the campus safety legislation, which was Senate Bill 134 in the 2019 general session. And beyond specifics, there were specifics such as, because after that with my son, it was probably a short time after that that Lauren was murdered. And so every part of this bill I went through with everything I could find on what happened with Lauren, and it was put into this safety plans that we were talking about and discussed. And it called for increased response in providing services to victims that the institution made in the preceding 18 months and what the institution expects to do in the upcoming 24 months. Now, this inclusion isn't something like hits people like, well, what's that? But it was easily can be glossed over. But it was pulled from changes, pulled from, changes that were made in campuses, and which became very effective in making sure that things are reported. And then it would be reported every November to the legislative session, which, we have to keep up on. But most importantly, while I was at the last committee hearing, I met Matt McCluskey, and he came to testify, and that was my introduction to the McCluskey family. And I had told him that I would never do things in Lauren's name unless I had talked to them, and it was such a fresh, it had just happened, but that bill became Lauren's bill, and everything in there was tried to be focused on what happened to Lauren. And so Lauren's life, should have never happened what happened to her, but it became a part of every legislative bill since then that I did, whether it be domestic violence, police reform, or whatever. Lauren's life and what she went through has been a part of everything I did going forward.
Thank you, Janie. Nicole, we're gonna go to you now. What prompted you to tell this story in the way you've told it, in a deep investigative way? So, and also when did you first meet the McCluskeys and get involved in that?
Well, I began, sadly, this is a topic that I have covered multiple times in my career on college campuses. That's a very sad reality. So it's something that I care deeply about, and I pay attention to stories all over when they occur. But I had began kind of keeping my eye on it. And as it progressed. And then when I saw the press conference with the University of Utah's president, that really got my interest more into the story and the way the school was responding to the tragedy. So then I soon after reached out to Jill and we started talking. I approached it as an investigative journalist. We sometimes are a little more concerned with breaking news and being involved in that kind of environment where you're deeply kind of in step with the stories that progresses. But I saw what was going on kind of on a big picture and just the way that everyone was responding all over the country. And I thought this could be a really interesting way to look at much more of a bird's eye view of when something like this happens on campus and you have an institution that is not taking responsibility right away. Why is that happening? And then how is everyone responding around that? But more just personally about Lauren, I became interested because I'm very interested in covering stories on women, especially who don't have a voice anymore, and they should have been heard. And it's an appropriate, I think, title for this panel. I call it sometimes like giving a voice to the voiceless. It's a theme throughout my career that I've really tried to do because I think it's incredibly powerful to do that so then change can happen. If you go back and look at failures and why they occur, that's really important. But I try to really put faces behind those failures and make sure people understand the actual human beings behind those tragedies too. And not always tragedies, but in this case. But yeah, I saw it as an opportunity to shine a really bright light on ways that people could pay more attention when you have a relationship that goes horribly wrong like this, and someone like Lauren and her friends rallied around to try to get help for her, and their voices were ignored. I saw it as a tool for change and a way to hopefully learn lessons from it. And that was my goal. And I think early on, Jill and Matt, they knew that we were in it for the long haul, and we weren't looking to do a sensational, turn and focus on the details of her murder. We wanted to look at all the ways that people and institutions failed, as well as ways that other tragedies could be prevented. So.
Gosh, thank you. Nicole's documentary is so powerful. So if you have not watched, listen. It's a very, very powerful 90-minute piece. Also, you answered this, Nicole, but I'm asking again if there's anything you want to add, but why Lauren in this story? And also the role, if you could talk a little bit more about that, but also the role. ESPN has a lot of resources compared to local journalists. What is the role of a journalist like you in ESPN and the work you do with local journalists in a story like this?
Yeah, well, why Lauren is I just saw that they're based on experience from other stories that kind of were in a similar vein. I recognized some major failures, and I also saw some inaccuracies that were being put out by the school itself that made me feel like we needed to dig into it more and find out why they were doing this. And then the more we reported on it and reported on just the whole history, including with Roland's history in the criminal justice system in Utah, we realized that a lot of attention was being focused on a few police officers and blame was being put on them. And we knew it was much bigger. And so we really wanted to look deeper. But I would say, yes, as resources, we do. And I'm very grateful. It's hard. This Courtney Tanner, who was mentioned, Salt Lake Tribune is an incredible reporter who is doing really important work. I knew we were going to come in and be covering this, but I didn't want it to be a competitive situation between journalists. I approached it much more collaboratively and was very honest up front to her. And also we, both the people that actually we included in our documentary, we included Courtney in it and Todd Reed, a news editor, the news director at the ABC station there in town. And we were just taking more of like a broader approach and looking at how the story was covered as well. We also were watching closely and like seeing all the work done by the advocacy groups involved. And it was really interesting to do that, because I think it's incredibly important that local journalists are given credit. I refuse to take stories and do that kind of stuff without making sure that the people who did the work are credited. So I wanted to give that credit, but we also wanted to give an accurate portrayal of what was happening on the ground. I think sometimes national media members could come in and just swoop in and think that they know what's going on and not understand the nuances of a place. It was really important for us to keep that broad perspective, but also make sure we had our hand on the pulse of what was happening in Utah. And the resources that we had, we knew this was going to take a lot of time, a lot of fighting. It was a public records battle, like none I've ever experienced in my career there. It took a lot of money, honestly, both with legal counsel locally, fighting for the records, going to numerous mediations, trying to fight the school to get them to hand over stuff. But we knew there was a vast amount of material that could retell what had happened in Lauren's last days. And if we could get it, it would tell a more complete picture of what went wrong. So we knew we just we had thankfully some really supportive bosses and editors at my company who believed in the story throughout. And I don't think they knew that we would be committing 4 years to it when they initially greenlit it. But they thankfully, Chris Buckle, my vice president of our investigative unit, and my other producer boss, Raina Banks, were instrumental in never giving up on the story. And that's a critical thing. But we had, I would say, time, patience, and resources to be able to do that. And I'm very grateful though for the local journalists that were able to keep the story going on that level. So it was a little bit of it's not lost on me that the two main journalists that were fighting for more information and the full truth to come out were two women. Courtney Tanner and myself were often lockstep trying to like get the same type of records and same things. And it wasn't lost on me that it was women trying to find out the truth.
Yeah, thank you. Jill, this next question is directed at you. Lauren did everything right. And as the documentary laid out, and yet a system failed her. When she found out she was dating a person who lied to her, she broke up with him. She called the police and reported more than 20 times. And she was not helped. So what impact do you think the local and national journalists, student activists like Devin played in holding people in positions of authority accountable in some way? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think it made all the difference. And if it would have just gone the way that other stories have gone, for example, there was a staff person who was murdered on campus at the University of Utah, and it seemed like nothing happened with that. And so with Lauren, by shining a light on her case, by having the students unsafe you push to have accountability from the work of Nicole and from Courtney Tanner, it really helped to hold people accountable. And a number of people left, and those people who did not care, who they basically had a bad culture there, especially the police department. They did not have best practices in training, and and I think a lot of them just didn't really care, And so the chief of police retired, at below 50, and the assistant chief left. Then they've told me that there is the current vice president for public safety there right now, Keith Squires, does really care a lot, and he's told me that they that the police department has over 90% of the officers have been hired after Lauren was murdered. So it's really a different culture. And so I think that matters a lot. And then just that they kept pushing to, so in Janie's, the new laws that she put in place are requiring transparency of reporting on where the crimes are occurring, for example. And just all these things are changing the culture that we are listening to victims and have policies in place that you need to get back to, an officer needs to be in contact with the victim within 48 hours, for example. Yeah. And a number of things like this. So all these best practices so that the lethality assessment program is followed, so that you can identify if someone might potentially be a victim of interpersonal violence, homicide. So all the things that these women have done have made a difference in changing the culture at Utah, but hopefully we want it to go beyond, of course, beyond Utah, and just have it to be really international. So, but with a focus on college campuses.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Jill. You gave a couple examples of change in progress, and the next set of questions are going to focus on that change in progress to the panelists as well. So Janie, this next question is for you. How has awareness of Lauren's story brought change? And also, what is change or progress in terms of policy regarding stricter laws around dating, violence, and stalking or university and college campuses today?
Thank you. And I love listening to all of you. I learned so much all the time from you, and thank you. So when I did that initial bill, right away we knew that there was some problems with seamless and coordinated communication on campus. For instance, in this case where there's a campus police and an outlying police force, how are they communicating? Because they had different data systems and dispatch, so they don't know, they're not communicating. And students they don't know where the border of the campus is, and across the street, it's covered by somebody else. I mean, where do you go? So this became the focus of that next bill, where we studied that governance. And it's not one size fit all, but there was study during that. And then during the 2021 general session, I sponsored Senate Bill 163. I had years heard from students and interns about, and even law enforcement, that buildings that were owned by universities off of campus, but maybe run by private companies, that there were sexual assaults and rapes and all kinds of things at these buildings. I didn't say that when I was doing the bill, but this bill focused on data disaggregation on crimes of each building and adjacent properties, which wasn't covered under the Clary Act. So students and parents can make informed decisions about where they want their children to go, both on and off campus, so they know that. And this is where I met two phenomenal students, Devin Cantwell, who's here right now, and Rebecca Hardenberg, who helped me work on this bill. And what amazing students they are. I mean, they started a lot of things Devin talks about, but their ability to, if I said I needed something, I mean, I have researchers and things that could help, but they had their heart in it, and they knew what they were doing. And so this bill was crazy. And I won't go into everything that happened, but it was a crazy, crazy bill that went through many. We had a statewide commission that would have been run by students over the state and funded, with higher ed. And we know that students are on the ground and they know what they need, and what they don't need. So this bill became highly controversial. So the commission was stricken from the bill, but the main part of the bill did pass. And I just want to say that all these bills that were supported They were supported by the institutions of higher ed and law enforcement. We put in a lot of hard work making sure we had worked with all the stakeholders. And the law enforcement actually, even to this day, provide information that I would never have known. And there are a lot of caring law enforcement in the state. And as I said, I sponsored many bills on domestic violence and police reform. And one of the bills I think I mentioned to Jill last time I saw her it was to me one of the most impactful and powerful for changing the culture in law enforcement. And it was Senate Bill 126, officer intervention and reporting requirements, which was done during the 2022 legislative session. And it sets forth standards of intervention and reporting requirements in law enforcement agency, employee, and reports police misconduct, among other things. This is applicable not just to, what we're talking about today, but it came with, support from people who were with George Floyd and everything that happened with that. But I just wanted to share kind of a culmination, a quote that Chief Ken Walentine said during those hearings. He was president of the Utah Chiefs of Police Association, and he stated, among other things, during the hearing, he said, "Unfortunately, the politicized scrutiny under which today's officers operate can push officers to withdraw inward and adopt a defensive mindset. Senate Bill 126 provides tools to help officers and agencies develop a culture where holding each other accountable is not a negative experience, but rather the way we support one another to effectively do the intense, sometimes traumatic work of law enforcement." He added that this legislation helps his department's effort to help officers see others as people who matter, focus on collective results, and hold each other accountable. And so it was very important. And I just wanted to say, with all these campus safety bills with Lauren, and there was a quote during the first safety bill, and it was written with survivors. And they wanted something hopeful to say for the end of the bill that would matter to them. But they said, "When we send our children to college, we want them to gain their independence, learn, get involved in activities in campus life, and build relationships that will last a lifetime. Unfortunately, the unthinkable can happen, and we need safeguards in place so our children have a better chance of fulfilling those dreams." So I just grateful to be working. There were so many pieces of legislation that came from, things that came directly from Lauren. And so her life mattered. It shouldn't have happened, but from it, a lot of good has happened, I think.
Jenny, thank you for your hard work on the policy, and because policy is change, and that's very, very hard work. And you mentioned the students quite a bit in that as well. I'm looking in the room here, online audience can't see this, but I see a lot of my students, right? And we have a responsibility to that, and that accountability is so important. Devin, to bring that student perspective to change in progress, what does that look like to you on a college campus when we talk about stalking and dating violence? What is change in progress?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So thinking about this, I think it really breaks into two things. I think there is change in progress that happens on an institutional end, and I think there's change in progress that happens on a cultural end on college campuses. From an institutional perspective, and I'll say, I think some of this is colored a little bit by my experience in this situation, but as also a scholar of institutions, I think the three things that I think matter a lot and that we can track change and progress through with institutions is really kind of what we started putting pressure on with Unsafe U, which is accountability, transparency, and resources. If you talk to a lot of scholars who do work on institutions, one of the things they'll tell you is that an organization can will say what their values are, but their budget will actually tell you what their values are. So if you're looking for change in progress for institutions, one of the first things I'd say is like, actually don't listen to what institutions are telling you that they're doing, but actually look to see where are they spending like people power on, where are they spending financial resources, where are they spending time resources on their campus, both to prevent dating, violence, and stalking, but also to like when this happens to folks on campuses, actually supporting survivors so that we don't end up in situations where students are, hurt or murdered, like Lauren. And so resources are a really big piece of this. Transparency is also incredibly important. I think a big lesson from this particular situation is the fact that, we have an example of an institution that acted with very little transparency, and I think has caused some pretty like almost irreversible damage to trust. I think it's going to be a very long time until there is real trust of the institution at the University of Utah because of the damage that was done. And so looking to see like how transparent institutions are, how forthcoming they are with information, tells you also a great deal about whether they are trying to protect themselves or whether they're actually trying to serve survivors of this type of violence or prevent this type of violence in their campuses. And finally, the accountability piece. It's really easy within institutions for individuals who make decisions in those institutions to kind of hide behind the institution itself or to offer up, as we kind of saw with the police officers and things like this, a couple of, sacrificial lambs, if you will. And it is a very different thing when you see a more systematic set of accountability, when you see standard operating procedures for like what happens when somebody doesn't follow a procedure that we're supposed to do here, having like zero tolerance policies, for example, what happened with the University of Utah Police Department and some of the cultural aspects there should have been zero tolerance on those things, and there wasn't. And we saw what happened as a result of that. On the cultural end, I would say it's weird because it's a world of tensions here. On one hand, change I think can be really slow, and I think it can also come packaged in some different forms. It might be that some people are going to be more vocal with violence prevention campaigns, or you might see more kind of conversations popping up, or in the case of University of Utah, as is the same case with many campuses, when they do campus climate surveys, we saw a huge increase in the number of people reporting that they were experiencing intimate partner violence right after Lauren's death. And a lot of that is because the awareness that was raising, right? So even being aware that they are in this situation. And so there's a lot of kind of soft signals on a cultural end. But I actually think that this is the area where there's more critical work, especially on the prevention end, to be done. And in particular, in Utah, I think one of the things that we really need to ask is, why is it that our rates of IPV and stalking are increasing? So there was a story actually run a couple of weeks ago where Utah is at its highest ever rate of intimate partner violence. And, there's some guesses as to why this might be, but I think there's a real cultural element here where we need to discuss, like some of this comes from the fact that, we still live in a society, and my experience living in Utah is like, this was a place where women are not often believed, their experiences and their worldviews are not often believed. And so I think it makes it harder to target this at a cultural level. And also, like, we have a real issue, like there's a real system of misogyny here that needs to be addressed. And we saw this play out in so many different ways, throughout, like Lauren trying to get help, throughout the lawsuit, even the treatment of like some student activists, trying to tell their stories or stories that we had shared through the Unsafe U account. And so the cultural piece is so much harder, but also that is the thing that will actually prevent this type of violence from happening. And so, yeah, I think it's harder to track and to measure, but there's the smaller, softer signs that you can see on that. Whereas the institutions piece, I think that's the one that's like easier to track.
Yeah.
But I think harder to like influence, or it feels harder to influence. So yeah.
Just amazing, amazing way you've laid that out, Devin. And really helpful to our students too, to hear how you laid that out. So thank you so much. Nicole, looking at the documentary, what do you feel has been the impact of your work, and how does it relate to impact and change?
Well, it first came out in March on ESPN Plus, it was behind a paywall at first. Our plan was though to get it as quickly as we could over to a place where everyone could see it. So we shifted it to YouTube before the school year started in August. And well, there was the impact, I guess you could measure from like critical reaction, and people's reaction was very strong early on. But then when we moved it to YouTube, which was really important because we always intended for it to be seen by everyone. And we wanted to do it before the school year when students and parents care most about campus safety.
Yeah.
And also the reality is that there is a very high spike of incidents that happen in the very first week when students show up on campuses. So we wanted to help with that awareness as well. The film has been seen by almost 3 million people now on YouTube. It is way beyond expectations from at least our network side. It's interesting because you're able to see who's watching it. So from that perspective of the film itself being shared, I will say I can't really share specifics, but it is being seen by many, many young people, which means a lot to me that a huge part of the audience are 18 to 22-year-olds, which is exactly what I was hoping for, and it's really important. But just more from the impact of the actual institutional change and what was hopefully learned from the film. It's starting basically it's kind of in the early stages of an education campaign. Numerous campus police departments have reached out from across the country trying to get access to the film before it was on YouTube. I'm working directly with the foundation, helping kind of put us in touch with those different organizations. So we are sharing the film there are police that have been creating curriculum for it and using it in their academies for training. Many campuses have also reached out and are using it in campus safety conferences. We know that a lot of housing counseling and different campus safety officials have screened it all over. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing. There's a education campaign that seems to be growing and picking up, and then just the impact of having it now available for anyone to watch, which is really important.
Wow. Thank you, Nicole. Jill, what role has communication played in the changing culture that responds poorly to victims of relationship violence and stalking?
I think that the communication side really is just increasing awareness, and just like Nicole was talking about, that I think a lot of people who have not experienced interpersonal violence or dating violence themselves might not really understand the problem, and might minimize it and just think, someone's making up drama or something like that. But I think that's really made a difference. And I think it played a big role in my promotion of Lauren's Promise. So I will listen, and Lauren's Promises, I will listen and believe you if someone is threatening you. And so I think right there, that was all about that, that Lauren's voice was not heard, but I, as a professor, my voice might be heard a bit more. And so if I can make that promise on my course syllabus to all my students, then they are invited to let me know, and I can help speak for them on their behalf, and connect them to resources and help advocate for them. And so through communication, through social media and different campaigns, we have people all over the world that have made Lauren's Promise. I just recently went to a conference in France, And one of the professors from Germany told me, I have Lauren's Promise on my syllabus, in Germany, and it's in Australia, but all over the US. And so it's at over 280 universities. Here we have faculty that have made Lauren's Promise. And I've heard so many stories that from both sides. So from both professors who have students have come to them, and also from students who have been helped. But it's gone beyond that, you don't need to be a professor. It can be, you can have Lauren's Promise and just make it for your classmate. So students can make it to each other. And I think it really takes a lot of courage to report if you are experiencing dating violence or stalking yourself. And so if someone can support you and can help you, that can make all the difference also.
And Jill, what is some of the most impactful work you feel the Lauren McCluskey Foundation, and also for people online and in the room, how can they support the foundation and the cause?
Yeah, so first of all, everyone can make Lauren's Promise, and we have here stickers that are out in the lobby, and you can go online, laurenmccluskey.org, and order it. We'll send you stickers for free. I feel like one of our biggest initiatives is to just increase awareness of the issue so that people understand the danger of dating violence and stalking, from the administration level to housing and the campus police. So everyone understands counseling, everyone understands the seriousness of dating violence and stalking. We're also working with experts to develop best practices, and across, so not just with campus police, but in all the different entities that would be involved. We're developing a campus safety score, and that's as an economist, I would hope that that for there to be incentives for universities to adopt best practices. And so one way we can do that is to develop a campus safety score, and we can rate them. And so that provides incentives for universities to adopt best practices, and it also provides information for students and their parents in choosing where they want to go to school. And then finally, we want to be able to share resources, and so through whatever ways that we can.
Thank you so much, Jill. We just have one question for the panelists left in about the next 10 minutes or so, and then just a little bit of conclusion and resources. So that's what we have left here. For the last question, though, it is an important one. The title of the series is Power of Voice, and this can be any of the panelists that want to respond to this in the next about 10 minutes or so. As we wrap up this discussion, what is the overarching message you would like to deliver on how we can communicate the power of voice to help people who know someone or who are experiencing dating violence or stalking? So what kind of overarching message should we deliver to that?
I was going to follow up a little bit what Jill just said. It's one thing, part of the reasons why I actually got interested in this as well is I just noticed and was so taken by how brave Lauren was to come forward. So when I first saw everything that she had done and all of her friends had done, this is what we've been working for, people who are working in communication, to help young people realize when there's signs of trouble to come forward. And so this has changed. This is a new thing. People coming forward, speaking out, not being afraid to go to the police. Like, it's essentially, there's products, a little bit of Me Too movement. There's different awareness all over, but work has been done for, I think, the younger generation to speak out. But if change doesn't happen to the people who are listening and to the people receiving those messages, those voices are powerless and nothing's going to change. So I realized that it's really important to have a voice, but it's also very critical to point out that listening and action needs to happen when people take that brave step to come forward and speak out when either themselves or people close to them are having issues, especially in this arena of the interpersonal violence. So I think that's been a big message that I say. It's like it's really important to have the voice, but it's really important for people to listen to those voices.
Absolutely.
I might just say a couple of things that my voice was through legislation in my role. But it's not the only way. You see through what Devin has done. And then Devin came through and other students have come to bring legislation and get involved in the legislative process by contacting legislators coming to testify. That's very powerful. And the numbers that come. What I thought was really powerful, I just wanted to mention, was this year at the University of Utah a few weeks ago, that the continuation of this, a lot of people don't want to look at something bad, they want to move on from it, but it was really heartening to see students that never went to school with Lauren and who came out in great numbers to remember Lauren and to show their support. And then I say speak up. I did some bystander training when they had a lot of anti-Asian violence, and you can train how to do that and take a stand, but speak out collectively, and be vigilant all the time, because make sure that the laws are followed. And my last year there, I was approached and said, "Oh, we don't have the plans ready. Is that okay?" And I said, "No, that's not okay." One of the people in my office went to look at the campus safety plan, and it still had the old campus police who had the chief, Brophy, he was still there on the campus plan. And I said, "Oh my goodness." So you have to be vigilant, and like someone like Devin, she's on there all the time and looking at that, make sure they're doing that. And so, because for me, one of the most important things, and I love what Jill and they're doing with the foundation, because they're helping that this doesn't happen to someone. We can't completely get rid of it, but it's the impact, not just on all the loved ones and how many lives it really impacted. So the foundation work is very important, and I love the commitment that you have. And I believe in this quote that justice is a matter of continuing education, and it's ongoing. So anyway, I have so much hope with the students that I've met that keep going with this. And thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you.
Um,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I have a couple kind of building off a few things that Jeannie had mentioned. So I think using your voice, basically I have a couple kind of pieces of advice, I guess. So one of the things that I think is really important, and especially as institutions become more sophisticated about their like PR and messaging and things like this, and managing students, right, is making sure that your voice is also paired with solid information, a solid understanding of the history and the players. I think this is actually one of the things that made a lot of our advocacy successful in some ways, because I saw this happen with other circles of movements on campus where administrators would essentially set up an endless list of like meet and greet meetings and informational meetings, and kind of walked in with the assumption that students didn't know what was happening. And they tried doing that with us. And then we were like, well, actually, and like we were correcting them on some facts, and they're like, oh, okay. And like the tone of that meeting changed. And we were suddenly getting some very different responses from the institution. So I think, especially, unfortunately, this is like an ageism thing, I think, as well. Especially if you were a young person using your voice, I think as much as possible, demonstrating that you understand what is happening, and having informational accuracy is really critical, because even just kind of one misstep on that will unfortunately get your voice discounted. And it's one of the reasons why Unsafe You, a big value of our organization was informational accuracy. Like we'd have people sometimes tell us stuff and we're like, okay, we're gonna go like triangulate and actually like figure out if some of this information is true before we go publish a post about this. And that approach saved us a couple of times, because like at the end of the day, your understanding of some of the information matters a lot, and your voice being taken seriously. I would also say too that we kind of always thought about the collective voice of the organization as a choir. So for anybody that has like done choir or vocal training, not everybody is breathing at once, right? Like you stagger your breathing off so that it sounds like you have a whole consistent sound. And so we've always approached our work like that. And I think this was really important for sustaining, like we are going on about 4 years now of, still, doing work. And a lot of this is because people have been able to pop in and out as like life events has happened or as they're processing trauma ongoing with this. And I think that that's really critical, is making sure you have a support network about that voice, and that you don't feel like your voice is the only one in the room. And the last thing I'll say is on an interpersonal note, of using your voice like on a peer-to-peer or like a one-to-one piece, that I think it's really critical to, of course, we've talked a lot about believing folks, but also showing up and using your voice in a supportive way, being honest, but also making sure that your voice is communicating the fact that the safety of that person is at the center of what you're doing, and allowing the person who's experiencing this violence to call the shots, and make the shots about like how your voice is going to be used in that. So I also wanted to make that note on an interpersonal level, because we've spent a lot of time talking about kind of the bigger picture, the public, the institutional pieces, and I think that interpersonal piece is also really critical.
Thank you, Devin. Jill, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I will just add, I love what everyone's been saying, and I want to emphasize what Devin said about the power of your voice. I want everyone to realize that there is great power, and be persistent, don't back down. And as long as you're, telling your honest truth and it's well researched, it can really make a difference. And I also would say that when I first tweeted about this panel, I said that these are my heroes, and they really are. That I feel like, every time when I would get worn out on pushing to try to, get the truth out or get accountability or make change, they were always there. And it seemed like, and it was like a choir that, we breathed at different times, but we kept singing. And so I think that really meant a lot to me.
Thank you, Jill. We have just a couple more things in conclusion, but I want to use this opportunity to thank this amazing panel today and give them a very warm thank you. In closing, for those of you in the room today who are seeking help yourself or for somebody that you love or care about, there are resources here today. So I want to introduce you, Beeler, if you could just kind of stand up and wave for people in the room. Beeler will be outside. She's with Alternatives of Violence of the Palouse and is here today. We also, Linda Middlehammer, if you can stand up and just wave a little bit for those of us in the room. Linda's with the Lauren McCluskey Foundation. She'll be outside as well. The direct number in Pullman, if you would like to reach Alternative Violence of the Palouse, it's 509-332-HELP. If you're a WSU student in need of counseling services, you also have that available. You can reach them at cougarhealth.wsu.edu to see all your resources. And also you can call them directly at 509-335-4511. And if you're one of my students here today, I see some of you, I want you to know that I have made Lauren's promise. I will listen and I will believe you. I will do everything in my power to make sure that I get you resources. Wendy and I would also like to give a very special thanks to a couple of people that helped out today. Anna Wheatley, as part of our marketing team, who worked really hard to make sure all y'all know about this event. So thank you, Anna. I'd also like to thank AOI staff who's here, Rob, You don't see him because he's doing such a great job. But Rob has worked on all the details with Anna. I'd also like to personally thank Jill and Matt McCluskey, Jill specifically, for her work with Wendy and I, and her advocacy and her willingness to allow us to do this event. And also Linda Middlehammer, who has been instrumental. She's amazing. I say I want to be here when I grow up, of helping us through these details and just working so hard for the foundation in this very important cause. And she's sitting next to other folks that work with the foundation that we genuinely appreciate all your hard work. If you would like to learn more, the LornaMcCluskeyFoundation.org. For those of you online, you'll see their website right after this event as well. And again, you can speak to Linda afterwards. To our audience in closing, everyone has the power to listen, to believe, and to respond to a person who is asking for help. So thank you for listening today.